Okay, kia ora no tātou. We'll get back into it, shall we? And the next item up is item 8, and we have Andy and Jovi here. You can speak very briefly to it. You don't need to go through every detail because we've had the report and we should have been able to read it. But certainly please highlight the salient and most important messages for Council. That would be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Kia ora councillors and manga Māori. As Chair Southgate just mentioned, really happy to take this report as read. Just wanted to bring your attention that in December last year we had our strategic plan adopted, and so this is our first touch point around that strategic document in terms of the particular outcomes that our team will be achieving. So over the course of the next 3 or 4 meetings we'll have a few of these touch points around the different parts that my team are involved in, and so it's a real pleasure to be able to introduce to all of you who know her really well, but Jovi as our Ethnic Development Advisor, and so I'll hand over to her. Thanks.
Kia ora, kumusta, and good morning. So really also just wanting to thank you for this opportunity to be able to present the Welcoming Communities Plan. I think with the recent events it has become more imperative. It would be a chance for the city to articulate exactly how it's going to truly embrace diversity, culture, and different faiths in the city. We should go past just celebrating diversity, where we just appreciate food and dances, and really from the leadership and across all the city, truly welcome the different communities that come to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take some questions. Before I do, Jovi, let me just vote of thanks to what you do, because in terms of being out there, welcoming people, welcoming communities, and across such a wide range of ethnicities, I know that you're frequently out 4 or 5 times a weekend, many evenings, and I appreciate the work that you do. Okay, Councillor O'Leary.
A question now that I was so excited to ask before. Are there any advantages of, and as I said, I know it's a pilot, but Immigration New Zealand's Welcoming Communities program, would there be any advantages of us in joining that? Can we join it now, or do we have to wait till the pilot's over? Because I really had a look online at that, and I really like it. What's your view?
So yes, you're right. So it's currently in the pilot stage, and this year they're just evaluating those pilot cities and the plans that they have produced. So I've been in touch with the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment person who's leading this program, June Rout, and keeping her informed about the intention of the city. So hopefully before the end of the year, they will open up expressions of interest.
And that would be to join the program because the pilot would have come to its end.
Yes.
Okay, so you see some real benefit there.
Definitely.
Okay, that's great. Now, in my exploration online there, I had a look on the Office for Ethnic Communities and on their website, and I found that development fund. So that's about to open soon. It's a $520,000 fund that communities can apply for. Does our ethnic community apply for that, or do you think that's something we could do? We could partner with them.
So yes, that's a fund that our ethnic communities have been applying to, but I haven't looked at the possibility of the city applying to that. I think it's mainly designed for community groups.
I wonder if, it didn't say that local government couldn't apply for it, but I don't think I need to add that into the motion, but if you could look at that and possibly see if there are any advantages of us adding our support to groups to target that fund, because I think this, this new stream, sorry, I'm debating here. Do you agree?
Yes. So yes, I
learn
could definitely
from you.
pursue that one. What's good
Okay.
about this plan and the way it's been developed is it's community-led, and in fact, I've already collaborated with Department of Internal Affairs. So yes, we're going to talk to the community, but it's not us pushing the plan. And even funders, local funders have already been interested in this. So if we get this strategic plan, welcoming plan for the city, funders would have some guide around what the direction the city wants to pursue in terms of our migrant
Yep,
communities.
and you'll keep us updated when that pilot ends and when you're about to launch
Yes.
into that as well. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Councillor Mallett?
Thank you. The report talks about outcomes and goals. It doesn't really, it's, you got to look very hard to find what those are. So can you tell me, I think the outcomes are Hamilton's recognised as a city prosperity opportunity, welcoming, blah, blah, blah. What are the goals then?
So the goals in reference are around our strategic plan, which we adopted in December.
Yep,
So,
are they in this report?
the goals, the agenda and the hyperlink through to the agenda.
So,
and-
sorry.
Sorry, the
what?
hyperlink through to the agenda. So point number 2 would have hyperlinked you through to this document.
Okay.
But essentially the 3 goals.
Just for the future then, can you just put them in the written
Can do.
agendas too, so that we can,
Absolutely.
because I was
Yeah.
trying to find them.
Would you like to know what they are, sir? Or
Beg your pardon?
would you like to know what they are, councillor?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, yep.
So they talk around diverse communities.
So hang on, are you telling me the goals or the
goals.
outcomes?
The goals.
Okay.
Yep. So the 3 goals that we've got from a unit perspective, diverse communities, Hamilton's diversity is celebrated and we enable all our communities to reach their aspirations. 2, places and people, we work in partnership to achieve locally owned visions and goals. And 3,
Sorry, I didn't hear that one, Andy.
places and people, we work in partnership to achieve locally owned visions and goals.
Yep.
So that's about working together with our community. And then community-led engagement, we support the community's ability to actively engage in council decision-making. So that's about us bridging the gap between our community and our decision-making table here.
Okay, so is the issue that last one's trying to resolve, that there are communities within our wider community who have, there are obstacles for them partaking and things like that because their language might be different or they might have different culture and things like that. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, is it?
Yeah, on a broad sense, there's a range of things, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's cultural, whether it's language, whether it's age. There's a few things that limit participation across our communities, both with you as councillors and decision makers, but also with some of our processes as staff. And so it's about ensuring that the decisions that we make at whichever point in the organisation that decisions are getting made, that they are taking into consideration the views and opinions of the widest possible community.
You said the word age, which has nothing to do with ethnic though, is it?
Oh, no, so that's a broad spectrum of
Oh,
all
okay.
of those possibilities.
Okay,
So, yeah. So when we talk about the 3 goals, so there are 3 goals. So the strategic plan talks about 11 particular outcome areas, one of which is Jovi's responsibility in terms of our ethnic outcomes, but we've also got outcomes within our Pacifica communities, within our growth communities, within the disability sector, within sustainable development. So there's a range of different
Okay,
things.
I'm just a little confused. Is ethnic communities different to Pacific communities?
For the purposes of us putting some dedicated staff resources into, yes.
So who's not ethnic?
So if you were to fill out your census,
Yep.
and if you were to tick New Zealand European,
Yep.
and you were to tick Māori, tangata whenua, then the general thing would be that you would potentially put into an ethnic community, but we also identify that our Pacifica community is really important for us to give dedicated support as a city because of where they sit in terms of the population figures, but also in terms of some of their coordinated aspirations. So those would be the 3 boxes. If you tick Tongan or Samoan, you'd probably be wrapped up into a Pacifica rather than into an ethnic. Some councils would look at Pacifica and tangata whenua together. Other councils look at Pacifica and ethnic communities together. We've probably traditionally done that, but our Pacifica community, particularly over the last couple of years, have said, actually, we would rather you identify with us as Pacifica rather than as ethnic. So we've taken that on board over the last, particularly over the review of our strategic plan.
Okay, I'm just a little confused that there's ethnic, there's race, there's cultural, and then you've got other things like, what gender you are, what age you are, your social, economic.
So, Gary,
We're complex
talking about the
beings.
strategy.
We are complex beings. We do fit into many different boxes, and I guess one of the things we talked...
With all due respect, I don't think that question is relevant to the strategic plan. Gary, please target your next question, which is your last one for now, to the actual strategic plan. We're not going to talk about race or any other of those matters in this.
Well, it's important to define what it is we are talking about, isn't it? Or does that not matter?
Andy has already explained how the definitions are derived. So now move on to your next question, please, if you would.
Well, I'm not satisfied with that definition that I got from Andy.
That's fine. Please
It's
move
not
on to
clear
your
to
next
me what we're
question.
talking about. So if we're going to ignore the fundamental things, the whole thing collapses, and that's on your watch, Paula.
Yep. Leanne's got something to contribute.
Just in the sense that I may be able to assist councillors. So in terms of the strategy, it's an approved document of council, Councillor Mallett, so there is no opportunity to revisit that position. That decision has been taken by council already. The matter in front of us today is actually the Ethnic Development Outcomes 2019 update.
Okay, thank you. Have you got any other questions on the report itself?
No.
I'll take one more. Thank you. No, there isn't. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. Firstly, just like to say that one of the things I've always noticed about Hamilton City Council and our work in the ethnic community is that we're actually looked up to as a leader and a key partner and friends, in fact, of the ethnic communities in Hamilton. And I think that continues, and this sort of shows that, and your guys' work shows that as well. So thanks for that. It's a sort of a technical question to Andy, because he and I have had this debate before. Why are you using way outdated population figures? Our current population is over 4.9 million. The ethnicities have changed, starting to change quite significantly in the last few years since this thing. We're never going to have good census figures, given the way things have been going. I mean, they're saying that themselves now, they're guesstimates, and they're late. Why don't we use the updated figures that our own council, other parts of our own council are using for that, and we can paint better pictures and more up-to-date pictures?
So my understanding of the technical data is really the census is still the benchmark. So when we talk about
Who's benchmark?
Nationally, it is so when we do population things, it's a changed, it's a projection. So the census is still the point in time.
Can you talk with our planning teams and our economic development teams, because they have gone past useless, outdated figures like the census and are using something up to date? And it does concern me that
Okay, so
the councils aren't.
you've raised a question, and I guess you can bring that point up in debate also. Thanks, Dave.
The other one related to the 5 largest ethnic groups are European. Well, that might be a census question, but why? I mean, what about people who've never been to Europe, weren't born in Europe, haven't got any grandparents born in Europe? Are they not entitled to be called, say, Pākehā or Kiwi or something like that? I mean, I object to even me being chucked into that area. I don't mind, maybe Scottish or Kiwi or Pākehā. Don't call me a European. I didn't come from Germany. That's where Siggy came from.
Questions, please. Focus on the questions.
So why not? Why are you? I mean, you wedded yourself to the census. Why? It's not. There's no decision by council to do that. I mean, otherwise I could just say, Jovi, you're Asian, but you're actually Filipino.
It's still both correct.
Okay, well, Andy, have you got a clear answer to that
Chinese
question?
should be
We
all
understand
under
what
Asian.
you're getting at,
Yeah.
Councillor McPherson. The The intent of
So-
your question is clear. Let's see if there's an answer to that.
So my understanding of all of the data is that the census, though it is old, is still nationally recognised as the point in time in which things of our ethnicity and things of where we live are that is the anchor. And so until the 2018 data is released, unfortunately the 2013 census data is the absolute. When we talk population projections, we can talk on the macro, and we take into considerations those who are entering and exiting both the country and to some regard local, but there is guesstimations that go into all of our projections. So the census is still that mark. And then when we talk particularly around our ethnic communities and those who choose to self-select with particular ethnicities, that doesn't take into consideration in the projections that we use for our macro planning. So when we talk micro, the census is unfortunately the most reliable data that we still have.
It's not reliable, for instance, in
no-
relation to the Indian population.
No
which has
debate,
changed substantially.
please, with
So
all
I'm
due-
about to ask the General Manager if we can have a discussion about aligning the statistics your units use with the ones already being used by other parts of council, which are not these at some stage. I mean, I don't like to be told that this is what someone does nationally
Okay,
when
so
we haven't had a
leave
discussion
those
about
bits for
what's
debate.
relevant to us.
Let's get a response from Lance, and then you
Yeah,
can
I-
leave those points for your debate.
I'm happy to talk to Jen about it in the areas of council that, you know, use the other information, the more up-to-date stuff that you're alluding to. And we can talk to councillors who are interested in that too, either offline or through a briefing.
Okay, so good point made, and you'll no doubt come back to that in your debate. Councillor McPherson, Mangai Te Pora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koe, Andy Korua, ko Jove, Pepe ana korua I tēnei ata. So I know as part of the plan is to review the welcoming community standards. Is that to review them to localise them?
So not to review, but to use these welcoming elements, look at them. So what we did, for example, in our workshop was introduce these elements and see where they think their organization or the city is at in terms of, say, inclusive leadership. So all those different elements. So not for them to review, but as opposed to initially assess where we're at as a city.
Kapai. So do you think that we need to localise the standards a little?
So I think what would make it local would be the way we move on with the plan. So because these are the national standards, then the local discussions would be how do we actualize inclusive leadership? So with those elements are actually outcomes already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kapai. And so the outcomes of that, I'm not too sure, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
if that will come back to this committee to say whether or not we're...
So there are already outcomes associated with those elements. If I may just read one, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So under inclusive leadership, it says local government, tangata whenua, and other community leaders work together to create, advocate, and continue to foster a welcoming and inclusive community. They lead a shared plan to increase connections between newcomers and existing residents. And so all those other elements already have corresponding outcomes. And it's a matter for the city to put action points or initiatives, I suppose, under those particular elements.
Yeah, I suppose you're thinking more about end results, outcomes,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
opposed to outputs.
And where that we'd be able to monitor if we are meeting these standards or where we're at on that.
Yes, so that's what the Ministry of Business Innovation is currently doing, setting up those. So there's the standards, and there's monitoring, accreditation kind of document that they're preparing, so that when we move on to the next phase, separate from the pilot ones, we develop our plan, and they can assess us against those outcomes. It's like the age-friendly city, I suppose. There's an international accreditation for that. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, congratulations on the report. My question is going to be much kinder than another colleague, but it does relate to population data and demographics. The University of Waikato, the population studies up there, what interaction are we having with our local demography experts?
From a council perspective, or from
in terms of the context of this report, in terms of we're looking at numbers, we're looking at different ethnic diversities, age distribution, income. I'm just wondering what what work they perhaps are doing, or what interaction we're having with them.
We haven't had any particular recent interactions with them around the data that they are providing for us as a city. So in terms of this particular outcome.
If we're looking at a need in our community, because we are the home to a very high level population studies and demography unit and work that they're doing. I wonder if, do you think there might be more scope for us to interact closer? Because obviously it could very well be that they could be doing some work with us around the data that perhaps the census is somewhat inadequate.
Yes.
Yeah, we can definitely.
So with all due respect, that's a good question. It's along the line of what Councillor McPherson and Lance has assured us that he will look at other ways in which we can bring data, more up-to-date data to the table. So that is something he's going to report back to you on. Yeah,
the tenor of my question was, while we have the census and we have this Department of Statistics and their woeful census, which has gone down the tube because they didn't have people going into houses with bits of paper, I mean, you could see this coming, and I predicted it and others did. I'm just wanting to focus on just maximising, the local expertise we have, Lance, in our own city, particularly.
Yeah, so we've
Okay,
understood that from
thank
both you and from Councillor McPherson. It's quite clear. Councillor Henry.
So much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report. And I know Jovi's, both of you are doing a fabulous job, but I see Jovi out a lot on these social and community events. Look, just one thing, I look back on it and I was just I was just looking at what we talked about before with the play strategy, and I noticed, and I thought that before, you're talking about, with welcoming community standards, and I know it's national, but if we look locally, maybe the play strategy also could, have they talked to you about, with the community and social development team, because that's not been mentioned. So I'm just wondering, with the play strategy that we talked before,
Yes.
they did talk to you as well, they
Yes.
communicated with you. Okay, it's just not in here.
And in fact, if you look at the elements, there's
Yeah.
welcoming public spaces.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of crossovers and collaborations with all the other strategies.
That's wonderful. It's just nice to see it in print as well. From your end, it's there, but not from the other end. So it's just wonder. We don't want to work in silos. We want to have everyone work together. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome.
Just one quick question for me under paragraph 33 with the welcoming community standards, and there's a bullet point relating to business employment. Where will we go to get a greater understanding of what role this council has in supporting the economic and employment needs of our migrant communities, our ethnic communities?
So in this outcome, it says councils work with business associations to promote the contribution that newcomer businesses, business owners and skilled migrants make to the region's economy. I think the council already does a lot of that anyway, but I suppose when you see it on a plan and that's action points, it makes it.
I'd like to understand that in a bit more detail, just to maybe catch up with you on that. So thank you for all the good questions. I'm happy to move the report, if there's a seconder. Councillor Casson. Any debate? Councillor, I'm going to speak first as mover, if that's okay, and followed by yourself. Just, I'm not going to say very much. I think it's the work that we're doing in this area is incredibly important. As you say, Jovi, never more so than it is today. And you are doing a fantastic job. This area is only going to get bigger and bigger from a council perspective as we become more diverse and we have more immigration into New Zealand. And one of the things that I was drawn attention to lately is that around valuing our ethnic communities for what they can bring to the economy and in the workplace. And I have met with a few people recently who are very skilled people who've come here for a variety of reasons to get a safer new life, who are not even able to secure an interview after applying for 70 or 80 jobs. And that's really quite disappointing to hear. It's not that they don't have a skill set at all. It's a very competitive work market, we know, for some of those jobs anyway, but they're not getting into consideration. And I think that's an area that we could work on some more. I'm not sure what the solutions are to that, but it's certainly something I feel concerned about. And but other than that, the welcoming community standards to me looks like a very good framework, and it's actually building on upon a lot of the work that you, Jovi, and Andy are already doing. So I commend you for the work that you're doing. You are in the community everywhere, all of the time. So yeah, this is taking up to Porter's point around there's a difference between what we're going to output, what we're going to do there, and then the outcomes that we get for people at the end of it. And I guess that's where our focus is improving the lives of our citizens at the other end of it. So just watching brief on that. Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, obviously I broadly endorse what the Chair's just said, particularly around the challenge of jobs for our newer settlers. Also want to compliment the team, and particularly Jovi, and most councillors, I hope, will be aware of Jovi's sort of work on the weekends and you know, very much following on from the marvellous work of the late Philip Young. But I think this is a good report. I do agree with Dave, however, I think we do need to you know, look at other alternative forms of census data, and I think stats with the with the delay in the latest census because of their imprudent decision just to go online purely. I think there's, you know, we've got to be careful we're not dealing with out-of-date data, because I strongly suspect that in the last 6 years it's been a very dynamic situation in this city. I think also, you know, when we talk about ethnic, we need to make sure that that term is as broad as possible, and Councillor McPherson raised the whole issue of, you know, how do people self-identify, and as he says, he has been to Europe actually, but he says he doesn't identify because obviously his roots and his ingredients, and he's not a, you know, he's had a long term in these shores, whereas someone like myself who's got an English mother and spouse, I would fill out a whole census form trying to describe myself. So I think we've got to be careful to say, oh, you're ethnic, but I'm somehow a Kiwi. In fact, we're all Kiwis, we're all New Zealanders, but we just have different ingredients. And I think also to recognise that we've got to be very careful we don't, you know, categorise, you know, because often people, as I said, are a whole range of things. But I think it's really crucial that the council stays in this area. I think it was Councillor Southgate that says we are seen actually as something as a role model for the rest of New Zealand. And I, for example, I particularly want to compliment and give honour to the many groups in our community who are working for our very diverse community. Obviously the HMS Centre, the different interfaith forums, you know, there's a whole lot of people out there in our community who are really working for that cross-cultural, cross-faith, you know, understanding, and I think the recent tragic events have highlighted absolutely, actually, what a connected community we aim to be. Thank you.
Councillor Mallet.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting the recommendation. It talks about reporting against these outcomes and goals in the future, I hope. Yep. Okay, can you just make sure those outcomes and goals are clearly identified in the future reports, which I assume they will be? Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I really am, I'm going to emphasise what I was questioning. I really am keen on our city having a proper program of welcoming immigrants. So I really do want to press upon you to keep an eye on that so we don't drop the ball on that. When I look at on the website, it talks about welcoming communities, being inclusive leadership, equitable access, connected and inclusive, civic engagement, which we do really well with our citizenship ceremonies, welcoming public spaces, etc. And it is more important than it has ever been after the events of the 15th of March that diversity is supported and is celebrated and is embraced. And I haven't had an opportunity publicly to thank the community development staff for their support of our community members after that event, particularly that vigil. I did do it informally through the communication channels, but as we move forward and as the country repairs itself and our city repairs itself, your team, more than anyone else in this organisation, will be at the coalface and will deal with the after effects, I guess. So I just wanted to, it's very timely that this strategy is here in this chamber today, but I also wanted to make sure publicly for the record that I thank you and that you understand the immense value that you provide and that the structure that the strategy provides going forward as well. I think that is something that will be beneficial to the city for years to come. So thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Hi. A couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to say I agree with a very good speech by Deputy Mayor and also by Angela just then. All the points that they've made. And maybe just to explain that I think the report's very good, and I think, as I said before, the work that's being done is even better. My worry with the report using figures like this, it makes us as an organisation look bureaucratic and out of date. I want us to be up to date, look switched on and be switched on, and we can do, if we keep going harking back to old censuses because some other bureaucracy hasn't got its A into G, then we sort of don't get treated as seriously as we should be in this area. That's where I'm coming from. So I'm sorry if I appeared strident about the report. It wasn't about the report. It's about that failing that I think this council sometimes has, not just here, but in this area is certainly one of them. Thanks.
Thank you. No, I think you made your points very well. It's good. Councillor Henry.
Madam Chair, and thank you for the report and thank you for all your hard work. It's wonderful to go to these functions and community functions and seeing you always there and you bring people together. That's what I love about it. And as an immigrant, this is a really, I probably can relate most to people that have come new to the country and that do feel isolated, that feel that they don't belong, they don't know who to belong to, where to go. And I think you're doing a wonderful, wonderful job bringing the communities together, helping them out, setting them, especially through the settlement centre, on the right path. And it is so important. And I think with that new strategy, and yes, with the update, I agree with Councillor McPherson, it's going to be very exciting because we are having more and more immigrants coming to this country. And what an awesome country we have got. We do live in paradise still, although what happened shows us this happens everywhere now, and which is really, really sad. But again, just like Councillor O'Leary said, you did a great job with the vigil. So fast, the reaction was so fast and so wonderful, and it just really made me proud of our city and of the council staff, how wonderful they worked in that space and how you made everybody feel. It was just an amazing evening. Andy, thank you. You were incredible when you spoke up there. So really, really, you held it all so well together, and that's the beauty of a really, really good MC. So I just want to say that too. It's just fantastic, and of course to Lance. Look, he was the head of all that, so thank you for that. But like I say, as an immigrant, it is so important that we are made welcome, that we are valued for what we bring into the country, what we want to, and I would say most immigrants want to add value to the country, and if we give them that space and that time and and give them an opportunity to bring their skills and everything into the country. It'll be so wonderful. So I'm super proud of what we do here at Council. And with this strategy, I think we're going to move ahead in leaps and bounds. So thank you so much.
Mayor King.
Yeah, I just want to say quite clearly, and this is quite pertinent with what's happened over the last 2.5 weeks, is that we are a Judeo-Christian country with a Judeo-Christian foundation, and we were clearly taught through both the Old Testament and the New Testament to look after the vulnerable, and that was quite specific. That was the foreigners, the orphans, the widows, and I also throw into that those who have mentally unstable. One of the verses in Leviticus says, "Do not mistreat the foreigners who are living in your land. Treat them as you would yourselves and love them as you would yourselves. Remember, you were once foreigners in your land." And I just want to remind us that we are all, apart from the Māori people, the Indigenous people of New Zealand, we all moved here. We were all first and second generations and third generations foreigners who have moved here. And we just need to remember that that's sitting there in the background. I got a phone call into our office this morning by somebody who is in the media, who was brought up in this country as a third generation Pole, and the names that they were called by their first generation and second generation coming into this country. And he was actually in tears on the phone. And because of the events that have happened over the last weekend in our city. And this is not how we should be treating people who are first, second and third generations, and especially into our country. They might dress differently, they might have a different belief system, they might look different, but they are a part of our culture and a part of our country. And I commend our city for what we've done, for where we're heading. The Settlement Centre is an outstanding organisation which we support, and it's and I believe it's from what I'm told, it's one of the top 2 in New Zealand, and that we do it so well. And I just want to make it clear, as a mayor of Hamilton City, that we welcome immigrants and we also welcome refugees to the city of Hamilton Kirikiriroa. And our job is to protect those people, to give them a hope in the future.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to speak to this, but I thought I want to get this out. Thank you for the timeliness of your report, and thank you for educating and being patient with people like me who have come into this role with, with a fair bit of community experience, but, obviously green in other areas. So I appreciate what you're doing. I was at that vigil on Saturday night, the one after the attacks, and I was standing there, and there was, I think the song "How Great Thou Art" was going, and a gentleman reached over and grabbed my hand, on one hand, and I think he was Somalian, I think he was Muslim, I'm not sure. And on the other side, a Māori gentleman grabbed my hand, and we were all standing there holding hands, singing this song. And I looked around, and I suddenly realised what Hamilton, Kirikiriroa, and Aotearoa had become. And it all happened around me. I've been so busy in my job being a councillor, being on social media, being a broadcaster, and remembering back to the days when things were great when I was a child, that I hadn't stopped and looked at what New Zealand had become. And if there is one ember, one tiny little glimmer of good that has come from these horrific events of late, and I'm not just talking about this weekend, I'm talking about the past 2 weeks, it's been that actually most of us as New Zealanders have had to stop and pause and look at what we've become as a much more inclusive and much more integrated nation. And it's nice. It's a different kind of nice. And I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for her words, and I'm no great Labour fan, but I'm grateful for the way she's handled this, and that whole thing has come through this country. And this comes at a perfect time So I just want you to know that what you're doing is educating and consistently, gently educating us. Andy, I thought you did a terrific job at that vigil, as did the staff. So thank you for the timeliness of your report and thank you for the patience.
Thank you. I do have a very brief right of reply. I see this strategy in the welcoming community standards as, again, a driver for us to do all of our work, all of our council work in a way that supports all of the people that live in our city, no matter what their ethnicity is. That's what this is about. This is about making sure that we play our part in creating a community in which everyone can thrive. And I know that sounds a little bit sort of... But what I want to also mention is that with the bullet points for the welcoming communities, it makes it even more important that we get out into the community where the community are. We need to go where they are if we're going to increase civic engagement and participation of ethnic communities, because they are not, generally speaking, going to come into this chamber and tell us what they need. We need to go out amongst them and find out what they bring to the table in the way of strengths and what their needs are. That's what this council's role is. Yes, look, we all endorse and support the comments that have been made around council's role in these very hard times that we've been through and will continue to go through for some time. Well done. I too feel proud of the way that we support people in this city, but this is work that's got to go on into the next year, the year after that, and the next decades to come. We've got to work with people to improve their lifestyle in our city and their opportunities. So we'll go to the vote. And thank you. Coming? Are we just checking the time? I'll reset. Off we go. Another touch. Just looking at the time. Just keep. Deputy Mayor? Deputy Mayor? Could you poke your thing? It was reset. It was reset. Okay.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to staff. We have a number of items before we go into public excluded. I'm suggesting that we go through the next item, which will bring us possibly up to around 1 o'clock when we'll have a lunch break. We may get in 2 items. You never do. You never do know your luck. But we'll certainly get into item number 9, which is the River Plan Task Force update. Okay, so there was a little bit of email traffic around the process for this. It might be useful if I just get Leanne to make a few comments about that so that we can be assured that we're in the correct process for this decision.
In
Sorry
the
to put you on the
absence,
spot.
well, I'm just not sure to what extent all councillors have visibility of some of the conversations, Chair. So I don't want to unnecessarily litigate those conversations. General Manager Sean's here as well, if anyone wants to speak to the annual, if anybody needs to speak to the annual plan process, but suffice to say that I'm confident that the process by which a task force is appropriately bringing forward a recommendation to its parent committee, which is this committee, and the process for that committee then sending on any recommendations it sees fit to council is entirely consistent both with all terms of reference in our governance structure, but also the way in which we've precedent within this and other trienniums. So,
Thank you. That was very clearly expressed, so that I think does help with some of the... Okay, Councillor Taylor. Oh, do you want to talk to this in any way, or just let, as Chair of the River Task Force, you would like to say a few words?
Just very briefly introduce it, and then possibly it could be opened up to questions for Natasha or whatever you suggest. Look, I'm just pleased to provide an update on the task force's meeting and refer councillors to some recommendations that we've brought to today's meeting. As you will see from the report, most of the discussion revolved around what the task force sees as a need to develop a wider vision for the central city and how it relates to the river. And this basically came about from staff pointing out that there is work that really needs to be updated. We need a level of detail that we haven't got at the moment in the task force's opinion, and there's a real risk of creating public spaces in one place without thinking about the consequences elsewhere. How do things work together? The other aspect of it, there was some discussion about concerns with how well the Grantham Street boat ramp was working for boaties at certain times of the year. I'm pleased to say that the recommendations you've got here are no longer necessary on that, as staff have done some terrific work, and I've told Zeke Fisk was highly involved in that, to actually find another solution so that we don't, it appears we're not actually looking at having to spend 40k after all, so that recommendation can be removed. So I've actually got some slightly revised recommendations in consultation with staff, which I would like to get up if the chair's happy with that.
Yeah, yes, certainly you can move that. There are anyone else is entitled to move the staff recommendation. Questions, Councillor O'Leary.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So questions to staff, just on page 31, under the Donny Trust Fund, the task force, pardon me, it says in the report that the group agrees to spend, or wishes to spend, up to $100,000 for artwork on the jetty. But then underneath it, it says that staff are to pursue an alternative funding for the above. Can you give me an update on that?
Certainly, the intention there is that we'll pursue alternative funding rather than use the $100,000. So, however, there's a time constraint around when we have to get that done by. So if we cannot do that, we would need to use that Donny Trust Fund. So we're trying to avoid that.
Okay.
But for this particular work, it needs to happen when the barge is in the water. So there is a time frame issue.
Okay. And will you talk to, say, the likes of Mesh Sculpture Trust?
We'll be talking to all and anybody we think we can, can get something from.
Natasha, when is the last time someone met with the Donny Trust?
So we've been instructed that we're dealing with the Donny Trust via Momentum, and they've asked us to do that. So we are talking to Calvin Eglinton. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So are you 100% confident that that money is still available to us, that $1 million pledge that we got in, I don't know, 2013 as a result of the Ferrybank Master Plan? You're still 100% confident that that money is committed to us?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
And I did talk to Calvin in principle about whether the Donny Trust would likely support this. So while we haven't put a formal request for it, I've had an indication that it would likely be supported.
Okay, all right. I'm really pleased to hear that staff have done some work around that 40k. The 1.25 million that was sitting there from 2017 or 2018 annual plan, where's that at, and will any of that money be incorporated into this 200,000, or is that all spoken for?
So 550,000 of that is set aside for the jetty, and there's the remainder is set aside to go towards the boardwalks, should we get the Provincial Growth Fund. If we do not get that, my understanding is the way that we're operating at the moment is it would need to go back into the savings, and then we would request and contest for that.
Okay, all right. The annual plan proposal that has been endorsed by the task force here says it will review the principles and intentions of the Central City Transformation and the River Plan, and certainly Councillor Taylor in his sum up from the group said that some work needs to be updated. So can I take from that in confidence that the task force will not just a once-over lightly, but will actually look at the principles in both of those plans, because they are
Yeah.
getting on in their age
Yeah.
now, and a lot of work went into them. So
Yeah.
it's more than just a light brush over.
That's correct, and Luca Dwyer and I and staff have been working had a number of groups to discuss how we can actually extract better value from the CBD than we have been to date. So this is in response to that. So it is an intention to.
Yeah. Now, Natasha, who will, I'm assuming, I mean, $200,000 is a lot of money. Who will put forward the terms of reference with the scope, the brief, the members of the group, who's going to be leading it, how decisions will be made, and all of those things? Where's that going to come?
I have to be honest, we haven't got into that level of detail at this stage, but the expectation is that one of the first things we'll be doing is confirming with the councillors on the priorities and scope for that piece of work and how
Right.
we do that, and it will be a collaboration between Luke and myself.
Yeah, so normal practice though for work like this is that, so say that group just crafts up what they think the scope and the brief will be, put that into a terms of reference, and then that gets signed off by the parent committee. Is that your intention?
Yes.
It is. Okay, and under that will be things like timeline, when you've got to come up with this plan and things like that. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm referring to 3B in the staff recommendation, and I'm not sure whether that is proposed that recommendation is going to be changed in the tinkering that Councillor well, I'm not sure what that tweak is, but just in terms of that recommendation and the motion that went before Council on February the 26th, can you just outline what is specifically different?
Fundamentally, the previous proposal related to an area which I'd add that the River Plan Task Force has agreed to call that Central City Park area the CBD Riverside. Just getting that piece of info in there as well. That 200,000 related to just that area. This is significantly different. We're talking about the area that's covered by the Central City Transformation Plan, so it is a much larger area. The CBD Riverside does form an area within that, and it would be a consideration, but it has to be considered on the same level as all the other key areas that council has a level of control over. So
do you think this change now will de-emphasise what we were looking for on February the 26th when we considered this $200,000 to go in to provide a master plan for that particular project? I mean, if it's going to be included, that's fine, but will it be included to the same detail where we might get, you know, an indication of what the pros and cons are of that CBD Riverside and what the cost is likely to be?
So the intention with this proposal is that you will have, for those projects that we think need to be considered as part of the 10-year plan, you have sufficient information to make an informed decision when you come to the 10-year plan. So it may not have quite the level of detail that we would have gone to if we were just spending that on just the CBD Riverside piece of work, but it needs to be sufficient that you can, otherwise we've, not achieved what we need to achieve. So, but we need to do it holistically and in mind of all the other areas within the CBD.
Do you think to do a proper job we need more money to do that as well as integrate that, or whatever the intention is, with the rest of the work that we have already done and are yet to do on the Central City area?
I believe that we have enough to do what we need to do in terms of informing you for the 10-year plan.
Okay. So in terms of that motion which looks at providing information for the next 10-year plan, are we likely to comply with the obligations that we have around the demolition or redevelopment of the buildings that we've currently purchased, which I suspect now form part of the CBD Riverside?
I think that answer would come out of the piece of work that would happen as part of the CBD plan.
But I think, don't we already have a contract? I seem to remember reading somewhere that the demolition was needed to be done within 3 years.
Well, that will be for council to consider when they're looking at the different projects.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Have you finished with that line? Thank you. Councillor Bunting?
Yeah, just a very brief one regards page 32 at the bottom regarding the River Centre. Just for the rowing clubs who are, they're still wondering what's going on. I couldn't quite make sense of the agreement there. Hold until the next triennium and then seek confirmation to agree that the Ferrybank Development Plan will not proceed for at least XXX years.
Yes.
So can you sort of say something to the rowing clubs for us and let us know where they're at?
So they're wanting council to give them some certainty so that they can decide whether they're going to be investing or not in that area. The River Plan Task Force discussed this, and my recommendation was that a good time to do that would be when we have the next triennium, because they'll have a better understanding of what that group are likely to put into the 10-year plan or not, and what we can or cannot commit to.
Okay.
So that's what that's.
That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher?
Just also, can you just perhaps just clarify the heritage component? Because obviously this report, I assume, will be looking at very much the street front of Victoria Street South.
Yeah, and you'll see that in the minutes, but we haven't necessarily gone to that level of detail within the proposal, but the intention is that we will bring it all together in terms of how the Central City Plan works. Did you want to add to that, Jen?
Sure. I would just say that the heritage work that is happening, that is now underway following your decisions of last week, will feed into this. So Luke O'Dwyer is across both of those, is leading both of those projects, so they will come together.
Will this plan, I mean, obviously we can have something that looks good in 10 years, but obviously this plan will be looking at the relative and, the appropriate staging of something. If, for example, hypothetically wanted to extend the VTOR site, presuming you would look at the appropriate staging of that?
Within reason, yes. I mean, it's not going to go into the nth level of detail.
Sure.
But
The moving parts, obviously, is the theatre and the potential pedestrian bridge across the other side. To what degree are our timelines sinking? Because it seems to me that the theatre becomes a really crucial part of the Central City transformation jigsaw puzzle, if it's not going ahead or not.
I would say that by the time we've finished this piece of work, we'll have a lot more certainty around that. In the initial stages, we'll be looking at what-ifs. So, and we need to consider what-ifs in a number of spaces. It's not just there, but there's a lot of what-ifs within the CBD. And so the early options would be looking at that. By the time we are nearing the end of this, I would hope that we've got that certainty. Otherwise, it's going to make it more difficult to make recommendations. So.
The question's been raised about the rowing club, facilities down the Ferrybank, and obviously where, if there's to be a so-called river centre, where that locates. Is it the museum? Is it there? Do we have any sense of a timeline that the proposal is on? Because I wouldn't, through the chair, want to unduly delay, given the fact that our rowing clubs have spent quite some time on hold.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I want to get a sense of, if they've got a tangible development ready to go, what would be a reasonable period where we could say, well, actually, we've done this X work, you can go ahead, rather than wait for the end point of our plan.
I couldn't give you a time frame. All I can say is we'll look for opportunities at the right point to make those sorts of decisions. So at some point we'd need to come back to council and say, here's your preliminary options and what impact this has on that decision making around the rowing club's use of the area.
And can you confirm that this proposal, I think, is just as much about reinvigorating and reviewing our Central City transformation plan under the previous council as it is about the river plan.
Absolutely, it's about combining the two and extracting as much benefit for Hamilton out of that central city as it is about making sure that we're delivering on the river plan as best we can. So we'll coordinate the two together.
Thank you.
So I've just got you've got Councillor Taylor, but this is for questions.
Chair, no, if questions are finished, I just wanted to signal that I actually have a part C in consultation with Councillor O'Leary, who is keen to second the motion. I have a part C to add to it as well, and governance staff are just putting that together now.
Okay,
and I just wondered if we may be able to get that up when,
Yep.
only if questions are finished, I'm just signalling.
Okay, so while that's being worked up, I just have a couple of questions. And I was at that working group meeting, and it was a very constructive conversation. Just a couple of things around proper process for adopting any significant changes. So on page 32, the river plan status, we had some conversation, as you'll recall, Councillor Taylor, around public confusion with an existing river plan. Are we doing the river plan, or are we now doing something else? And genuinely, there's a lot of confusion. And I see the points that have been put in here from staff, but my question is, what would be the proper process coming out of that for adopting any significant changes from the existing river plan? Because they are, the chances are things are going to change. Time changes everything, and opportunities have come that weren't there before. So what's the proper process when you've got an adopted river plan to pick up any changes that might occur?
So the river plan is fixed in terms of the themes that it says. So if we were to be changing those, we would definitely need to be coming back to council and getting that signed off. But also on the way, we have the stakeholders who originally had their input into those themes. With respect to the projects that are mentioned on pages 40 and 41 of the river plan, sorry, not the document that you've got there, the plan itself makes it clear that those are subject to change, and we need to make it clear that what council is doing in that space along delivering the themes and what they are not. So I believe that is more around how we clarify our messaging rather than changing the river plan per se. Okay, so I still think have some concerns around clarity for the public, but we'll absolutely
work that through.
And that's reasonable.
Question on number 5 on page 33 about museum activation. I wondered if it would be possible, given the conversation we had at that time, to remove the word front of the museum, because we were talking about connectivity with the museum in general, and it could be to the front, it could be to the back. I'm talking about bullet point 5 on page 33 of the agenda, which talks about museum activation, which I support. Having said that, I don't want to lock us into detail, and it's got the word front in there that does lock us into connecting the Gothenburg terraces to the front of the museum. There may be another option in there that we should be open to, so I just think the removal of the word front, could that occur without taking away from the consideration?
I'm comfortable with that. I'd need to check with the chair that's...
Yep, okay. Still talks about connectivity. That would be great if you could do that. And then in the number 6, staff seek council agreement to investigate an alternative route to the proposed path between VOTR and the theatre. I'm not sure what that means. Should I know what that means? Because the public might read that and also be confused. What does that mean to us?
We have discussed that in PX.
We could, oh, okay. So we're going to discuss.
There is not today.
No,
but it has been discussed in PX, and I have left it at something reasonably light around looking at alternative routes.
Yes, well, that was a little while ago though. So
I can update you. We can have that discussion.
Because there are stakeholders involved in that, so
Correct,
we need to be transparent as far as we practically can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's the range of my questions for now. Have you got your... Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question on the terms of reference that came up on the motion. I thought the river plan had a terms of reference, so is this speaking to that, or is it specific to the plan?
Yeah, it's for the study. Yes, for the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
I think they're just tweaking that. It was my wording was a little bit general.
Thanks.
We'll get it up, make sure.
Okey doke, we can get it up.
Cool.
Didn't the terms of reference get approved by
In terms
council?
of revision study,
For the
the
plan?
terms of reference.
It's not for the task force, it's for the study.
Terms,
What's
okay.
the 20-year vision study?
That's the city plan.
What?
But
The
it's-
city plan, the central city plan, which is what the 200.
But it's wider than that CBD Riverside, it's the whole, but
Okay, so if there are any questions
we're calling
of
it
the
20.
mover, let's
no,
have
that's
those.
true, let's change, it's CBD.
Okay, so let's ask the questions formally so everybody can keep up with what's going on here. So there's a little bit confusion around the
Yeah.
20-year vision studies, and that is, Natasha, is the,
So in the proposal, we referred to it as a central city plan. So I I believe that.
also say to be named.
Sorry, you're.
No, that's the
That's-
stretch of Victoria Street, that
So
this is the whole CBD.
So what you're trying to achieve with that recommendation is that the terms of reference for the study that this proposal is for comes back for that agreement.
I'm happy to move that.
Can I just get clarification, there was an earlier C there which seems to have disappeared, and that was around the 40,000 for the Grantham Street boat ramp. Has that now been moved?
We don't need that money now. There's an alternative to solve that issue, which
Okay,
is
okay, I
dredging
must have
around the
missed that.
current boat ramp.
okay, I think it's really important that we know what we're voting on, so we're just doing a little clarity over there. Is that what we're doing?
Could I suggest just put in 20-year vision for the central city study, so that's actually consistent with the wording there?
Yep.
And the other thing you need to realise is if the money doesn't get through the annual plan, then I'm not sure why we'd bring back terms of reference if there's no money to do it.
Yeah, so it's
So
got
it probably just needs a clarification at the end, should this be approved and the funding be approved in the annual plan?
Subject to long-term plan approval.
Annual plan approval.
Oh, annual plan, sorry, annual plan. My fault, annual plan. Yeah, it's coming.
No,
Annual.
It's annual plan. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca.
My mistake there. Okay. Right. Have we landed where it is?
Yep.
Okay,
so.
so we'll go into debate and discussion, starting with Councillor Taylor as the mover. No, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, the updated central study, central city study is a response to what the task force believes our stakeholders and public want from us, really. They want some direction, cohesive direction. They want to know what the council intends doing as a whole in the CBD, particularly in regards to the river and public spaces. And the signals that I've been getting are that once they know what we want to do, they are involved with us in planning, they want to invest and be part of it. There's obviously some highly strategic areas, Victoria Street, Museum, Ferry Bank. There's a lot of potential projects. The key here is how do they all fit in together and with the rest of the CBD. We've got a river plan, and it's a good one, and we've got a CCTP. But at this stage, I'm not quite sure how well they are linked. The CCTP provides a high-level view, but doesn't provide a detailed vision for public space and public investment, in my view. So what this is doing is partly taking the CCTP to the next level of detail, really. We're not talking about reinventing the wheel completely. We're updating the great stuff that's already in place, but we feel but staff feel needs more details. And it does need updating when you think of it, because when we did the CCTP and the original river plan, there wasn't even a regional theatre being talked about. Now we've got a 70 million odd theatre that's likely to be built on Victoria Street by the river. So suddenly we need to work out how that links with the rest of the street and the rest of the river frontage. And how does what we may want to do on Victoria Street link with Garden Place, for instance? How does it link with Ferrybank? What do we want to do there? How can we link up the theatre, the casino, Victoria on the river with the hotels? What part in all this does Embassy Park play? What part does the West Town Belt play in all this? How will the Auckland to Hamilton corridor plan impact on it, particularly if we need to create a rail link into CBD? So there's actually a heck of a lot of work to do. If we start this now, it will be completed by August 2020 and time for the next LTP, so we can actually set some tangible priorities. So what we're suggesting here is we develop a river-oriented, detailed CBD master plan in conjunction with our stakeholders, one that we can then confidently go out to the public for consultation and say, here's something really up to date, here's something cohesive, here's something that works together, here's something that we've already potentially got some private funding for, lined up to get on with it. What do you think? Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I speak against the motion. This is $200,000 that is not currently budgeted. Anything that comes out of this recommendation, this study, will fall upon the shoulders of the ratepayers. It's my contention, I've mentioned this a number of times, that this generation of ratepayers, or this cohort of ratepayers, has done their bit with regards paying for development of this river plan. A start has been made, money has been spent, and that's been a long time coming. So I acknowledge that. But I think that it's time for this council to put away the ratepayers' chequebook. The development of the river plan is an intergenerational project, and I think that this generation of ratepayers has already paid its fair share. And also remind councillors that council is already operating within a hair's breadth of its financial covenants, its balancing the books and debt covenants. Something like this is very, very likely to blow it to smithereens. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I've got a sense of déjà vu around this, and I think that song starts, we have all been here before, and we have, of course. On February the 26th, the request for this funding was rejected by Council. Now we have a bit of wordsmithing going on, and we have a few mirrors, and we're pretty much seeking the same request, but in my view, by extending it citywide to bring in past river plan reports, footbridges and the CCTP. Now, I don't disagree with that, but I would have thought those areas would have already been covered in the earlier report that we sought, which was for $200,000 to be spent specifically on the now known CBD Riverside. I sense that we are looking at too much with a limited budget, and it could easily fail in terms of getting the detail that we really need to make meaningful decisions. I'm concerned that we might miss the point of not focusing on the CBD Riverside, and we will end up with a bland report which omits important things like the cost and all of the pros and cons of this multi-million-dollar project. The focus, I believe, needs to remain on the project itself, which to date has failed for the most part to get majority support around the council table, and certainly appears to have very limited support from within our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Marae Tapora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, iwi support the recommendation as it is up there. There's a number of things. So when the river plan was first put together, we had a member on the working group and tried fully endorse the outcome, which was the river plan. I agree with the study in that we need to recalibrate what the principles and intentions of the plan and of the Central City transformation plan and see where we end up there. On the point of where iwi's at, we've confirmed our next 5-year plan as part of our 50-year plan in that we have. So it'd be good as a stakeholder and certainly as a partner to, as I say, recalibrate on that. What else is appealing about doing this is that it enhances, it will enhance our partnership, particularly around how we may partner to seek other areas of funding. I absolutely agree with Councillor Mallett. We shouldn't be going back to ratepayers time and time again. I do believe, though, that in doing what's proposed here, we'll be able to seek alternative funding and alternative partnerships and different ways of doing things, and that's certainly our hope that will fall out of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. And the huge advantage, obviously, of bringing it via this committee is that we have significant input from the Deputy Chair of the River Plan Task Force, and and as Mangamaru rep, being able to contribute and vote on this particular item. I think, as I understand it, this is a really good opportunity to recalibrate both the Central City Transformation Plan and the River Plan, dealing with some new realities, like, for example, the theatre development, will or will it not go ahead, the aspirations of our rowing club fraternity, etc. And I just hope that we are sufficiently nimble in this plan and in terms of the work, because there may be some interim decisions we may have to make along the way. Obviously, one of my passions is that whole Victoria Street South kind of heritage streetscape zone. That's a personal thing. And how that might enhance and be enhanced. Also, if we look at the VTOR site and its possible extensions, when and how does that work, and how does that sort of calibrate? The other thing, which of course is, I think, exciting, I am excited by the West Town Management Belt Plan, because you've got the two boundaries, you've got the West Town Belt and the Waikato River. So I think there are some significant other parts that are entirely relevant to this sort of 20-year vision for the Central City. We can't waste any more time. We need to have some work ready for the next 10-year LTP. And if you look at Taronga and Rotorua, they are big time enhancing their CBD and their waterfront areas. You know, they are into some serious projects. And we do need, in my view, to take a leaf out of their book. I think it was Councillor McPherson or someone said, don't forget, or Councillor Taylor, don't forget that the commuter corridor, even the sort of relevance of a location or existing location for a Central City rail platform, that all sort of comes into the mix. So I think this is some really critical work. Pick up Councillor Pascoe's point, the budget may not be enough, but obviously a new council, in terms of its next year's annual plan process or LTP, may want to calibrate that. You know, once we've got some really clear ideas of where we want to go. Picking up Te Pora's comments again, the partnership thing is critical, and also, you know, there are a number of players out there. You know, we've got Central City Apartments, we've got a whole lot of other developments that we need to also relate to. It's just not us doing this as a council. This is us doing this in partnership with some very, very important stakeholders.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on a wee phrase that Councillor Pascoe mentioned before, déjà vu. I know while it was a slight foible, this former DJ has a different view now. And, well, I'm getting hungry. It's also quite ironic because in the previous motion that Councillor Pascoe supported, I opposed, and in this one, I'll be supporting it, and I get the sense that Councillor Pascoe will be opposing it. The reason I opposed the previous similar motion in that last meeting was that it seemed a little bit narrow. It seemed to me about the park, and I'm not in favour of just that park as a concept in itself. But what swung me on this one is it is higher level, it's wider, it's more integrative, if that's such a word. And the thing that spun my wheels about it is, as Councillor Taylor was talking about, there will be funding attached. Because I have been quite critical of a lot of these coffee table book type plans that didn't have funding attached to them, that previous administrations have kind of made expectations for the community, and now this administration's got to find the money for it. So this one has quite a clear path with regards to funding and external funders as well. So I'm inclined to look at this with a much more favourable light, and I look forward to, in my transport capacity, getting involved in the plan as well. So I'll be supporting this one.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. Yeah, Councillor Gary must have a crystal ball, because he said all that comes out of this plan will fall on the ratepayers, but he hasn't even seen what's going to come out of the plan. And never before, in my view, has council had such a strong relationship with the community in terms of external funding. We didn't have momentum 3 years ago, and to Rob's point, Councillor Rob said that Donny invested the $1 million because they saw the plan, and yet today he's done a 180 and wanting to undo the plan, which he voted on last month. So I find that odd. Later this month, on the 30th of April, we have an evening promoting and inviting the business community to partner with the council, multiple businesses and community leaders, which I think is exciting. And although it's been done in some capacity before, it's going to be somewhat unprecedented. This council is moving in a greater capacity to partner with our external stakeholders, so that the old ratepayers fund everything is going to be an antiquated model. And so I can encourage Councillor Gary to get on board. Might need a new election mantra. I also challenged Councillor O'Leary last month on the same thing, because I felt that the scope wasn't actually limited to Central City Park, although a few members wanted to make it so. Today, in collaboration with our colleagues, Councillor O'Leary is seconding this motion because she can see the value and the need that this vision will give to our city. So what does that tell you? Out. That's me.
Councillor O'Leary.
I was certainly listening very closely to Councillor Hamilton's prose just then, just to make sure he didn't say anything that was untruthful. But he did speak the truth. Look, what was that?
I nailed it.
You nailed it. Sorry. I don't know about that, but look, I can see how there's been some sensible thinking and actually some future-proofing around this particular proposal. So thank you to staff and the task force for coming up with a recommendation that I can support. I am comforted by the fact that the Central City Transformation and the River Plan principles, and indeed the plans, will be looked at in a deep and meaningful way. The River Plan that Deputy Mayor Gallagher and I were on took 18 months and cost $150,000. And sadly, this term I have heard all too many times, it's been described as a coffee book table. This plan that I am happy, I always say that, coffee book table, coffee table book. I even wrote it on my notes. This plan is $50,000 more. It's a bigger coffee table book, Councillor McPherson. So look, I do have some great expectations for this. I am comforted that the Chair, Councillor Taylor, said that this is a long-term plan. So this will, not only will this produce a vision for the next 20 years, it's actually going to take a lot longer than the 6 months we have left to election, which was something that concerned me if this was rushed, because as I said, Deputy Mayor and myself spent 18 months on the River Plan. So my support does come with some conditions, and one of them, as I've just alluded to, we don't want to see another coffee table book. I disagree with Councillor Bunting on one aspect. We actually don't know what the funding will be for this plan. We've got some money to achieve the project, but there will be some significant projects that will come out of it. So that's for future. And actually that has been, I have to say, been the approach in the past. So yeah, I am happy to support this. I will do my very level best to attend these the meetings, and particularly to get the terms of reference up and running, because I think that is important. So thank you to staff, and thank you to Councillor Taylor for bringing a proposal that I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. I'll say a few comments myself. What we're doing with this recommendation is for the purposes of preparing a draft annual plan. So the way I see this is that it will have to, at that point, stack up in the annual plan and be able to attract funding ongoing. So this is just taking it to that next debate, and it'll come across all the other things that are in the annual plan, and we'll have to make some priorities and decisions. I needed to support this. I needed to be clear about a couple of things. Firstly, that this was not anything to do with the demolition of the buildings that we purchased in Victoria on the River, or plans that were circulated at that time, but this was a clean, clear look at the stretch of the CBD between Victoria on the River, the museum and Grantham. I think it's been incredibly unfair to the rowing club and other people operating down in the Grantham Street area, leaving them hanging in this time when they're not sure if the river plan's going ahead, or then there was a central city park, and then nobody seemed to know exactly where we were headed. So this is an attempt to put that right. I think we've still got some communication to do with the public so they understand to what extent this is aspects of the original river plan and what is going to move from the original river plan and why, because times do change. But we do need to be fair to other users in the community, give them some certainty. Otherwise, how are we going to get them to invest in their own buildings and their own futures if they don't know what we're doing? And that's certainly the case for the rowing club. It must be a very uncomfortable position for them. I'm a big fan of public engagement, as you know. I was on the other side of the river plan when I was just somebody who was consulted with and had liked some parts of it and less liked other parts of it, but I appreciated the opportunity to be involved and have my say at that time. So when we get out of this process, we do need to have another touchstone of public engagement. We do need to be quite clear with the community what it is we're going to do in this stretch of the river, to take away all of the confusion and to give them some optimism and enthusiasm for what can come out of this. My final point will be in respect to treating all of those people who donate money to city projects well. Donny Trust have been waiting since 2013 with a large sum of money, which they're really dedicated to making a positive difference to the riverside offerings of Hamilton City. Money's still sitting there. I felt a little bit uncomfortable about the potential to fritter that away with small amounts, and I'm still watching that. But we need to treat those people well. We need to give them certainty about when and how we're doing things so that money that they have kindly donated can be properly, effectively used. We'll go to the vote.
The motion is carried, 12 for, 3 against.
Who's the other against?
Yes, I can. That is Councillor Pascoe against. Councillor Mallett against. And Councillor Casson against.
So, councillors, thank you. That's done now. That's very strange, isn't it? We were, a number of us, actually I've spoken to a number of you, and like me, we did not notice that we agreed somehow in the standing orders for a 25-minute lunch break, which I would never have agreed to. But so how as a minimum, yeah, a minimum. All right, so I'm going to suggest that we do a 40-minute lunch break. I'm sorry for people that have been waiting, but it does also give them a chance. And the gardens item is too important for us to rush through at this time, so I'd rather do it properly. So if we could come back at quarter to? No, I don't know what that is.
It's 25.
It's 20 past, so we'll come back at 10 to. What did I say?